So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen.
This is a companion piece to a October-November episode we did called Doc Talk.
That's right.
It is Doc Talk Part 2.
Yeah. In Doc Talk Part 1, I most remember our discussion of Minding the Gap, because that was both of our favorite...
I was thinking Gaga.
Oh, Gaga, too. I forgot about Gaga. Yeah, with Minding the Gap up for an Oscar, another doc in this batch up for an Oscar.
Yep.
The conversation continues.
It does. We're going to be talking about Who is Arthur Chu?
That's right.
Billboard Boys. Mr. Fish, cartooning off the deep end, I believe, or at the deep end.
I think that's right.
Of Fathers and Sons. And John McEnroe in the Realm of Perfection. But
Good
first,
batch.
We have first impressions.
As always.
So we're going to watch the trailer for Apollo 11, which is in theaters this Friday and will have been in theaters for probably 2 or 3 weeks by the time people hear this.
Let's do it.
I'd like to know what you feel as far as the responsibilities of representing mankind on this trip.
That's relatively difficult to answer. It's a job that we collectively said that was possible and we could do, and of course the nation itself is backing us, so we just sincerely hope that we measure up to that.
All right, we just watched the trailer for the documentary Apollo 11. Are you excited?
I am excited. This documentary seems to have the right stuff.
Ooh, nice.
One thing that I'm not too sure about, though, is Neil Armstrong wasn't played by Ryan Gosling. How's that work?
You took my joke. It's hard not to think of Ryan Gosling. Corey Stoll, right? Wasn't he his
Buzz Aldrin?
Yeah, exactly. I think I read that they were even, like, the filmmakers were in conversation with Chazelle last year when they were making it, talking about, like, release dates and stuff, and they decided to wait rather than...
So you've heard about this? It's been on your radar?
Just because I think it was... People responded well to it at Sundance. I think I heard that people liked it. And yeah, I think that there was talk about, like, whether or not, like, it would be helpful to put it out around First Man or wait, and they decided to wait. Like, it deserved its kind of own space, which I think is great. And it looks great. That footage just is kind of awe-inspiring, like it should be, as you would expect it to be. And on the big screen, I think it will just be kind of spectacular.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah.
It looks like 70mm film footage, shot beautifully. Some of the close-ups that we get for a few seconds on the thrusters of the rocket while it's firing. Whew.
It's good stuff.
I can't wait to get back to the moon. Come on, Earth. We could do it. Take me back, moon. I'm going to go throw my money at the screen so that they know that I'm a big fan of going to the moon.
There you go. Yeah. IMAX, I think that's the way to see it.
And I think it's the only way to see it.
Yeah,
when it comes out.
Then it is definitely the way to see it.
Yeah, I have no idea what it's about other than the Apollo 11 mission. It doesn't seem to be focused on any other character other than the mission itself and just logistically how it was accomplished and how many people it took.
Yeah. The trailer is clearly not concerned with narrative too much, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Just to give me a sense of the, power of the image, and you got me.
Yeah, it's the existence of Apollo 11, much like Monrovia, Indiana, is the existence of Monrovia, Indiana.
Yep. Well said.
Let's get to a documentary that you recommended called
Wrestle.
Wrestling is all I do. I would have all my medals, but when my dad got arrested, he confiscated.
When you get that scholarship, get that job, and when you provide for your kids, you will understand why we fought.
You got a baby to think about. Look around. Everybody out here loves you. You ain't my child. I didn't birth you, but I love you.
Let's wrestle!
All right, Michael, that's the trailer for Wrestle. What do you think of that?
I'm interested. I don't know that sports documentaries are usually at the top of my, priorities list, but
that's why I asked, what do you think of that in that way?
Yes, it's but it was picked up by Oscilloscope. That's what put it on my radar. I don't know that there's anything terribly surprising about what the trailer is suggesting it is. It looks like it's a story of kids trying to pursue their dreams in wrestling, as you would expect. But it looks like it's probably emotional. Yeah. What do you think?
I love fighting. I love MMA. I love wrestling. I love sports documentaries. I love achievement documentaries in the face of desperate times.
Yeah.
This is my catnip, dude. This is it reminds me of The Fighter, which is a local documentary for us that was made about a MMA fighter who's never risen in the ranks beyond just kind of a fringe fighter who people fight to get a leg up in the Tacoma area, which was on Hulu last time I checked, if you're interested.
Oh, cool.
And it's very reminiscent of watching like Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler, starring Mickey Rourke. But it's a real story about a real guy who has real problems and real addictions to fighting. And this seems a lot like that, where it's, this white kid has his father in jail, and when his father went to jail, all of his medals were taken and his awards. There's an African-American boy who's being parented by someone who's not really his mom, who seems to have a kid on the way. There's two other boys that it also centers around, and it's about this opportunity to become a state champion. I know you're not as well versed in fighting in sports, but when you're watching really successful wrestlers, it can lead to enormous opportunities financially. Currently, the double holder of previously the double holder of the belt for heavyweight and light heavyweight was Daniel Cormier. Who is an Olympian wrestler. So when you're seeing wrestlers succeed, you're not just seeing these kids succeeding at something. It's if they do well enough, they're going to carve a path for so much money they can take care of their kids as kids.
Yeah.
And from the dire straits they're starting out at, it's gravitating.
Yeah. The stakes are very real. There are really complex things wrapped up in their goals beyond just the winning of a medal. It has kind of a minding the gap kind of feel to me for sure. I love hoop dreams. There was a tagline in there about it feeling like a hoop dreams. I hope it gets a theatrical release.
I imagine we'll be seeing it at the Grand Illusion.
It's very
like
possible.
Most other Oscilloscope productions.
Oh, you know what? I take that back. It was it kind of cropped up in my radar because it was at Northwest Film Forum. That's where I saw
really?
it.
Okay.
Yeah, I just remember that now.
Did it already leave, or are we going to be able to watch it?
I don't think it has come yet. Like a month out or so. So yeah,
we'll be watching.
Doc Talk Part 3.
Part 3.
There you go. Cool. That's Wrestle.
I'm a big fan of this documentary already.
Dope.
All right, how you want to start this sucker? We got 5 docs.
We got 5. Whew. We got a lot to talk about.
We do.
Well, do you want to start off with...
طيب إذا بكرة بايع المسرح ما بياخذوه. يعني أنا بدي زجه في المعارك. إذا النصرة ما زجته أنا بدي زجه. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. ايش عم تحكي؟ عم قاعد اتذكر خالد.
أشياء.
ايش ضحك أخاف؟
Of fathers and sons?
That is a brutal way to start this thing.
Okay. I know. I thought it might be easier to just do it.
To just do it. Okay.
Yes. The director's name's already escaping me, but it's...
Talal...
Durkee?
Durkee, yes.
I think that's right. Nominated for an Oscar. That's what put it on my radar.
Also, just for everyone, it is streaming for free from Canopy. If you have a library service that is connected to Canopy, you can watch this documentary as well.
Yeah, which is awesome. I had seen it. It kind of came on my radar as people were shocked that Won't You Be My Neighbor didn't get nominated, and that this one did.
You know what I'm really happy about is that people are talking about how Won't You Be My Neighbor not getting nominated, and everyone forgot about the piece of trash that is Three Identical Strangers.
Ooh. Yeah, you were not a fan.
Not a fan. Episode 1 callback.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I was deeply moved by this documentary. I was left feeling kind of despondent by the end of it. I very much appreciated that it did not opt for any, voiceover narration, except for at the very beginning and very ending.
There are small moments.
Yeah, some comments here or there, but it's
or actions, which we'll get to.
No talking heads.
No.
No stats on the screen. I think he knows that the images speak for themselves, and I think that feels like the right move.
Yeah, if the images don't speak for themselves, the ideology that they're repeating certainly does.
Oof. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I forget who it was. I think it was Michael Sosinski who said for him it was kind of like watching kids play in traffic. That's kind of how unbearable it was for him to watch, and I think that's a fair analogy. And yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about because I don't find myself eager to dissect the form here so much. I think this for me is very much about the content.
There's too many restrictions to review this based on form, is what I'd say, because we have a Syrian refugee who is now a resident of Germany, who has gone back to Syria and feigned his support for the incursion of Sharia law and the subjugation of anyone that is not willing to submit to the caliphate through violence. And there is no room for him to do artistic things with the form.
Yeah, of course.
In these conditions. These conditions of air raid bombs, of Russian military jets flying overhead, of the person he's filming having multiple sniper rifles and shooting innocent people far away on bikes.
Yeah.
Of children practicing science by creating citric acid bombs.
Yeah.
This is just it is what in America we would call another world, but in reality this is what's happening half the world away.
Yeah. I mean, you can read an article about something like this and know it and understand it, but to see it is to feel it. I think it's pretty devastating stuff. It just it left me kind of just with that feeling of hopelessness, with how can you ever, the thought of never being able to have a conversation with somebody who's had something so ingrained in them for their entire life. It just really reinforces sort of the impasse that you
were reach. You ever filled with irony when you think about the fact that when you boot up, you have an iPhone. I think that he has an iPhone in the phone.
Oh, yeah. So,
you know what you listen to on your iPhone, right? Mm-hmm. Aesop Rocky, perhaps a film podcast. Mm-hmm. He's listening to things about murdering anyone who disagrees with him.
Yeah.
Or he's looking up things about explosives.
Yeah.
Or things about his religion and his beliefs.
Yeah.
He's never looking up criticisms of his religion and ways of thinking more contrarianly, which will come back in Mr. Fish. He's not really, our main character here is never doing anything besides what he thinks will give him paradise, which is, to me, absolutely revolting.
Yeah.
And honestly, the whole film, while good, is revolting.
Yeah.
Because we're watching his kid, right? The first thing that his kid says is no, and I think the second thing he says is part of a prayer. after he scurries to his father's arm.
Yeah, yeah.
It's hard. It's
Some
really hard
some of these
to watch.
kids are so little.
And we watch the boy jump into a swimming pool as we watch it filled from the back of a pickup truck. And 20 minutes later, we watch that boy doing crunches in live fire. And I think 7 minutes after that, we see him just, straight up in the military,
Yeah.
This is like watching a documentary about the child soldiers of Africa. It is the same exact thing. It is just a different doctrine.
Yeah. I haven't had very many film experiences about child soldiers, but I was kind of thinking about Beasts of No Nation.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see that one?
I did. Yeah, great film.
Effective. Yeah.
Terry Joji Fukunaga.
Yeah, your guy.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think how you tackle this stuff in documentary versus the fictional formats, I think, kind of interesting. I think
well, how, especially this subject, how you tackle this thing without getting outed or killed.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the most singular moment in the entire piece is when he is in the countryside in a hovel that appears to be really well camouflaged with a small hole that his subject is firing a sniper rifle out of and shoots someone on a motorbike.
Yeah.
And he says, "My gun jammed. I got him down on the ground, but my gun's jammed. Hand me my other gun." And we can feel the documentarian trying to not give him the gun for as long as possible while still keeping up the thing. And there's a fella behind our subject who says, "Hurry up, give him the gun." And he finally reaches it out. And right when he's putting it up and gets the sight and is ready to fire, we hear him say, "They got him. They took him away." So we ostensibly hope that he's been saved.
Yeah.
But that's only because the documentarian literally just put his life on the line. So even though we're saying that like he doesn't have a voice in this thing, like
you feel his presence.
He could have just saved that guy's life by taking that one extra second, risking himself.
Yeah.
And I'm in the middle of reading David Mitchell's Bone Clocks, which spends a lot of time in the Middle East with one of its characters during some terrorist attacks in Afghanistan and stuff. And it feels very much like that because in that book he has to get people from the region to help him that are sympathetic with him, so they're also putting themselves on the line for Westerners. And within this documentary narrative, he gets this great shot that's really well edited where the subject is talking about different quotes of the Hadith that mean why they're at war, that mean the coming Armageddon, that mean what a Westerner is, and what how a Roman is really a European based on their interpretation of the specific line of the Hadith. It's a really great documentary at depicting what they actually believe, I think. Especially when he's lost the lower portion of his foot, and he goes and encounters all those men on the street that are laying on a blanket. And one guy's telling him to sit down, calm down. And the other guy's saying, "I'm going to murder your mother." And it's just this is a very hard subject, and I have a lot of personal feelings about it.
The chronology of stuff, it kind of unfolds in a pretty straightforward way. But thinking about just before we see that the guy has gotten his leg blown off, it's just the cut before there that we've seen the kids building a bomb.
Well, they're jumping on the citric acid bottle, and it's not exploding. And then through a miracle, it explodes when none of them are by it.
Yeah.
And then the next shot we see is him waking up, and he's got does he have stitches by his eye? Why does he have cuts? Yeah. And then we slowly, after a minute, peel down and zoom out, and we see that he's missing a foot, it appears.
Yeah.
But there's so much bandage, we think that he still has his whole leg.
Yeah,
and
kind
then
of unclear.
About 7 minutes later, we see that he's only got half of his calf and his shin bone, and that he's missing a lot more.
Yeah.
And then I think by the end, it's 6 months later, and he's finally wearing a prosthetic because he's healed enough.
Yeah.
And it's, at once you see this guy feeling the most bodily pain, laying in bed in agony, and you wish that he wouldn't feel that. And then you also remember that this is a terrible person that attempted to murder someone in front of us.
Yeah.
That beats his children on the street. that supports terrible ideas, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the title of this documentary is Of Fathers and Sons, right?
Yeah.
How many times did you see an adult woman?
Oh yeah, it's a handful of occasions.
No, you didn't see an adult woman once.
You don't think so?
Woman?
I guess maybe they were kids.
No. You saw a girl. You saw schoolgirls in that school setting.
Yeah.
And then you saw a girl once, I think, in the beginning, and then you hear his 2-year-old cousin get cussed out by our subject because she's walking outside of the house.
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. This is a series of terrible ideas, and it is documented incredibly daringly.
Yeah.
It is very much part of that, what is that other Syrian documentary that is a lot more endearing and hopeful and kind? Do you know the one I'm talking about, where they're the White Cross fellows?
Yeah, that came out last year or the year before.
Yeah.
Was it the White Helmets? Is that what it was called? It was about the White Helmets. Our City of Ghosts, was it maybe that one?
No,
there've been a couple. But,
yeah. But you know what I'm talking about, where basically by the end of the documentary, I think that every single person that was helping people in Syria had died. Yeah. And this is very much the companion piece of showing us who is maybe committing some of those murders of the White Helmets. And while it does make us sympathetic to these humans, it makes their actions inexcusable.
Yeah. It's pretty disheartening, to say the least. Yeah. Watching the two brothers, hug and say goodbye to each other as one's being sent off to the training camp, just devastating.
How about those end subtitles when it says that I will never see what was his name, Osama? I will never see Osama again. Death has divided us.
Yeah,
leaving it open whether or not Osama is dead or whether or not Osama would kill him.
Yeah,
because he is technically turning his back on the faith.
Yeah, he's becoming like a teacher, I think, right? Something like that. The brother who's not being sent to the camp.
Yeah. The brother who's not part of the military is taking care of the other kids and pursuing schooling. I think is in college at that point in time. But it really speaks to what happens if you become an apostate of Islam in those few words.
Yeah. I mean, with respect to the form, I mean, I think the only thing that you can say is kind of what he doesn't do, and the edit itself, where I think he does just connect the images in such a way that they do really accumulate.
I think
it's in their effect.
As much as the form of what he shot maybe isn't great, the editing is incredible. Yeah, it's really well thought out. The way that he construes those images together and cuts from one to the other, especially in the bottle scene, for instance.
Oh, yeah. That's the kind of scene where you just want to cover your eyes, like waiting for it to happen. Terrible. But, I mean, it's not very often that the Oscar nominations come out and there's something that, was just completely off my radar. I think that's kind of exciting.
This is one of those few genres in the Oscars where I actually respect the votes. Yeah. Of who gets nominated. Yeah. It's like, oh wow, you nominated something I didn't have on my radar, wouldn't have had on my radar if you didn't tell me it was even a thing. Kind of like Copernicum, which we're gonna go see this week. And thanks. Thanks Academy for taking the time to see this stuff.
100%. Yeah. They get some things right.
They do.
Not all. That is Of Fathers and Sons. What do we want to talk about next?
Something a little bit less murderous. So we could choose anything.
We got nowhere to go but up in happiness.
Well, let's start with one of our indie choices. Which one do you want to go with?
How about Mr. Fish?
He is doing really what editorial cartoonists are meant to do. This guy has balls.
I think it's the responsibility of every artist to reflect the times in which they live. That's why Mr. Fish's work is really important.
It's not a dying profession. It is a profession that is being systematically murdered.
Mr. Fish.
A rather short flick. I want to say this is 70 minutes, maybe?
Yeah, hour 10. 70
I can
minutes. That's how
appreciate
that translates. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty tight. Probably one of our happier endings of these indie documentaries. Even though he'd been laid off by Whole Foods, that was all that happened. He was still with his wife. He still had his children. He was still pursuing his art.
True. Relatively happy.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, compared to the other endings.
yes, exactly. Certainly the most optimistic,
Yes.
even though difficult times may lie ahead.
Yeah, we got some downers this week.
We did, yeah, we do. Were you familiar at all with Mr. Fish?
I had seen, I think, maybe 2 or 3 of his Trump cartoons because those are just so widely circulated on the internet now. And I think I'd seen one of his Hillary's, and then I think through a friend I had been sent that one about I need more money to finish my piece of work. And the piece of work is the guy that he's asking money from. And then it says asshole, but it's unfinished.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I kind of realized partway through that I've probably seen more of his stuff and just not even realized it. As I'm recognizing this stuff, but I couldn't tell you where I might have spotted it. But, certain things look familiar.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just kind of the nature of the
Cartoon,
style of kind of political cartoons.
It's very much a cult cartoon type of style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, an interesting guy in how relentlessly he kind of pursues his art, with some cynicism for sure of the powers that be. I think the doc is willing to kind of show the toll that it takes on his family. I think
Which is interesting because there's a point in the film where he begins to explain how he was affected by the fact that his parents didn't manage their money responsibly, and that he lost his mom because of it, and then he's doing the exact same thing to his wife and his kids.
Yeah,
and I was like, you don't see what you're doing. Yeah.
There's a part where the wife says something about how lonely it is to be with someone who's so cynical or so kind of disillusioned with the power structures he's attacking. That stung. I think the doc maybe could have let him off the hook, but I think some of that footage does reveal sort of the consequence of being so devoted to this passion.
Yeah.
Which I think is fairly even-handed. They talk a little bit about him, the death of print and how he's kind of being forced to show his art in different platforms and that kind of thing, and how it's going online, and that struck me as kind of interesting. Like, I do think there is sort of a unique resonance of a political cartoon when you see it in a paper right next to the news that it's commenting on. I do think that's something, like, I never really thought about that when, in contrast to watching it or seeing it in a gallery, which we see at one point. It just made me think a little bit about, like, the effect of the kind of platform in which you see art like this.
The context.
Because, a gallery, frees you up to talk to the person next to you about it, but I think there's also something about seeing it in the newspaper, like you
especially
used to.
After an article that, so you're already in a frame of mind, you're thinking something specific, and then it's acting on that.
Yeah, exactly.
That is a lost art form, and I mean, as much as we want him to succeed and make a profit, you can't put dicks in publicly circulated newspapers that children pick up.
Not today.
It should be pretty easy for him to understand that,
Yeah.
Because even though he and I see eye to eye on a lot of things about free speech and contrarianism, but I mean, if he had a 3-year-old daughter walking in the street that picked up a piece of paper that had a phallus on it, he probably wouldn't want his 3-year-old daughter to pick that up and see that. And that's what the problem is, that he can't seem to negotiate with.
Yeah.
Where, as his previous editor told him, if you could just let me censor your work, we could sell it, and then people would go seek the uncensored work.
Yeah. He is quite. He has a stiff backbone in what he believes. That comes across quite clearly. I mean, I think if anything, if anything, the documentary, I think, could have pushed him even more about even that very first story, like you just said, where he's talking about having thrown paper airplanes, outside his window, and I think it says, up your ass or something like that.
Fuck your ass.
Yeah. Where does he, sort of see provocation kind of become something more than provocation?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I have an answer to that. Just interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there is a certain art to being a provocateur that is necessary for culture's existence, because even if someone's criticizing something incorrectly, you need to hear all the sides of criticism that can be voiced so that you're aware of them.
Yeah.
It'd be like, there's a mountain, but we don't know what its elevation is. You need to know what it really looks like on the ground, and that's what his cartooning, at bare minimum, provides, is a mapping of, what the boundary conditions of our culture are in this version. The thing is, newspaper's dead. And it goes on continuously to talk about how it's hard for cartoonists to get publication and make a living, and that it's a dying or dead art form. And it is, but there are other ways for artists to create a profit. You can make a comic. You can try to get into fine arts. You can, sell out, go corporate. You can make things that people want in the Huffington Post.
Yeah.
Or you can get a totally different job completely.
Yeah.
But then they go on to say that the art form is now absent from America. Mm. And that specific art form might be. Mm-hmm. But they never mention the fact that memes have completely replaced political cartooning, and how widely circulated memes are now, and how it is a much more direct and logically more useful piece of criticism of culture. So if the argument that they're making is that culture is no longer being criticized adequately, I would absolutely disagree, because memes are proof that you can criticize culture really quickly, really effectively, and for free.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, in a sense, maybe it's kind of the opposite. It's that it's so widespread that any one piece is, it doesn't, resonate in the same way as when you look at one piece in the newspaper.
Exactly.
Because you're seeing it in the, flood of imagery that you see on the web.
Yeah, and I think that maybe memes have almost created more of a voice for themselves as an art form. Like, when we talk about memes, it's almost an art form now. And when we talk about political cartoons, we go, oh yeah, that's that part of the paper, which is, the paper is an art form. Yeah. I don't know if we ever thought about political cartoons as an art form, as a culture. Yeah. And I think that might be where the swell left political cartoons behind.
Yeah. I think. Do you see memes as an art form? Sounds like.
I think that they definitely are an art form. I don't know that I necessarily love them or anything like that, but there's just so much work going on that it'd be like, just because I don't like most country doesn't mean country is not an art form. Yeah. So I would have to say that memes are an art form, and all of them are created indifferently. I'm more partial to GIFs myself, but that is almost an extension of the meme, right?
I like a good GIF. There are many GIFs exchanged between these two podcasters.
There is.
Yes.
Quite a few desks and chairs are thrown in reference to Thunder Road.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think it's, a good doc in that it, sort of can stoke a conversation about kind of the value of the art he creates, art like it, the right platform, just like we're having. I think it maybe just could have gone even a step further in sort of maybe kind of exploring what effect that maybe has on his marriage and the family situation. I just felt like there was material there that I would have liked to have maybe just understood a little bit more.
See more of,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for anybody who has an interest in political cartoons, this is probably the doc for you.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate there's not a way for him to monetize with his style. It really makes no sense that there's not like a digital version of Vanity Fair where you have to sign in and be over 18 or have parental permission to look at some more mature content, you know?
Yeah.
Because that would just be a perfect fit of a publication. You know, Vanity Fair is where the great contrarian writers have been, especially, most notably, Christopher Hitchens. You know, and I would love to see Mr. Fish's art in the same publication that published Hitchens for decades.
Yeah.
It would just be a good fit. But, like, the fact that he can't strike some sort of a deal just to animate some sort of an R-rated cartoon for Netflix that would be in the same venue as the Duplass Brothers Animals on HBO is just astounding to me, because that little bit of a cartoon that we get in the documentary was great. I wanted to watch that cartoon. It was good.
Yeah, I think it got canceled. That's what they said,
right?
Yeah,
they canceled it during production.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bummer.
And it's, you know, I understand why an independent studio would have to cancel it, but why Netflix wouldn't reach out to this voice that would basically just elevate their brand and bring in more people to their platform. It's just absurd.
Yeah. I sense your frustration.
It's here. It's probably
it has arrived.
I might disagree with quite a few of his individual stances on things, but he is such a fascinating artist that the fact that we don't get to interact with him and disagree with him as an artist in our everyday lives is very disappointing.
Yeah, I would agree. But at least it sounds like he's sticking with it.
Yeah.
So he can still find a good break.
And his wife is still working her ass off so that he can continue to share his art with the world as much as we are able to take it in.
Yeah. Go her.
Go her.
Yeah. I don't have a lot else. You?
I think that one of the great things about this documentary is the animation editing of his cartoons. It was really seamlessly cut together, and some of those fade-ins, fade-outs from one piece to the next, where they would layer them over each other, was just really damn good editing.
Yeah, just smooth, scene to scene.
And one of the only documentaries where I was like, I gotta watch these credits. I have to watch these credits.
Yeah, they keep you around to the end. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Any closing thoughts from you on this one?
I know we watched this via screener, but I think this is on Prime Video, so I think folks can go check it out. It's great.
Yeah. Streaming where available. That's Mr. Fish. Who are we going to talk about now?
How about a little Arthur Chew?
Who is Arthur Chew?
My dad always taught me, with good reason, that there's value in a simple life, a life without jeopardy, as little as possible. A steady job, you know, keeping your head down, avoiding controversy, avoiding conflict. I had all that. And now I started saying yes to those jeopardies instead of saying no.
Who? Chew? Arthur Chew. Yes.
So I had an interesting experience with this documentary where I'd never watched Jeopardy before. Netflix released the Tournament of Champions compendium series to streaming in December, and that was my first exposure to it. And it was like the generational Tournament of Champions or something. So you're watching the champions of the 1980s compete against the champions of the 1990s, compete against the champions of the 2000s, and so on. And then the champion of the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s would each compete against each other.
Yeah.
And I'm just watching this guy who's playing the game like no one else just destroy these bitches.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, this guy's awesome.
Who is this dude?
Fuck yeah. And I'm like, oh, he's Arthur Chew. Cool.
Ah.
And I hear there's a documentary about Arthur Chew. I'm like, what? is just about him murdering bitches, because I want to watch that.
Just a montage of him just constantly winning.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to watch. And that is not what this documentary ended up being about at all. It's more about what psychologically is going on with him.
Yeah.
And how he sees reality. And it has nothing to do with his almost savant-like ability to play this specific game of Jeopardy.
Yeah.
Which was interesting, right? Because we have the intro where there's an interview with Alex Trebek.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all the Trebek that we get. And then we're just on to the fact that, like, wow, he has a wife. And she's, like, taking care of him, much like we had in Mr. Fish.
Mm-hmm.
And he's openly telling us, kind of like Mr. Fish was, that he can't have a job.
Yeah.
He can't do it.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. And then he's spending all this time looking at his phone, looking at the internet,
mm-hmm.
when his wife is across from him, or
mm-hmm.
literally talking to him.
Yeah.
And he's giving one-line answers and then dwelling on this stuff. And I thought that as a documentary, it was I thought the way in retrospect that I viewed it was I had these expectations of this is a Jeopardy documentary about a great champion who I did not know anything about Jeopardy, and I thought this guy was awesome. He was like my gladiator in Jeopardy. I loved this guy.
Yeah.
And then it starts with like maybe being a fluff piece about him and slowly devolves into like this guy's destroying himself and tearing himself apart. I thought that was a very interesting documentary in retrospect. While I was watching it, I didn't always know what it was, and I don't think that the documentarians even knew what they were going to get, because this is so much just the effects of life happening to a guy.
Yeah. The title alone, Who is Arthur Chu, makes it sound like it's going to be kind of this investigative work, and we're getting instead kind of a lot from him about what he values and what he is wanting to do, and how he wants to try to leverage the fame that he's garnered from Jeopardy, and how he's trying to sort of lead that into some speaking engagement and that sort of thing, about nerd culture, internet bullying.
Well, more than that, it's about proselytizing an agenda against what he believes are people that victimized him, because he views the world as a series of powers, and he wants to leverage any power he has to acquire more power for people who he thinks deserve it, instead of taking the power that he already has and treating it responsibly, which is the ignoring of his marriage, the ignoring of the relationships that he actually already has. Some of those really painful moments with his father, where it's like, you're acting like a dick to your dad for no reason. You know, it's not like I don't understand why you have this pent-up aggression towards him, but you're in your 20s, late 20s, early 30s, late 30s. You can probably just try to have a conversation with an adult about whatever your problems are, instead of letting it build up in you. And at one point he says, I am anger, basically, is what he says, and I have to present that to the world. And it was just like that basically summed up the problem of him, that he's seeking anger, and he's seeking to lash out at things and to hold on to things in a concrete way, instead of acknowledging that life is in flux and that his dad did mess up, but now his dad is trying to be a good dad and a nice person, and he's not allowing room for the ebb and flow of life. And it's slowly destroying him, as we see by the end of the documentary.
If anything, I could have maybe used more time. Maybe the footage just didn't allow it. But Arthur talks so much about how he thinks his sort of identity is wrapped up in his ancestry and who his parents are. I think some of the most interesting moments are most definitely these scenes where he's with his father, with his mother, and I think those were kind of the most human moments for me, that I think, if anything, I could have just used more of to really get at the way in which that does kind of inform who he is. I would maybe think that the documentarians maybe gave him just a little bit too much space to sort of preach about what he believes in. I think I do mostly agree with what he the change he kind of wants to bring about, but I'm not sure that him talking about it made for quite as engaging of a doc as it might have been had they...
It also wasn't too factually accurate. While he has general claims that are very reasonable and I can agree with, he makes bigger leaps that are more stringent, that have boundary conditions on truth, that are factually inaccurate, that he is saying out loud. And that's where it's like, you're not dealing in the real world. And we're seeing these moments with his father, with his wife, where it's like, as much as you want all this change, you're like 100% of the problem in your own relationships.
Yeah.
That's what I kept seeing. Like, you know, as much as we all want to have a great code of moral ethics, our first responsibility before having a code of moral ethics is treating the people that we're in relationships with well. And he can't even do that. So why should we trust him to tell us how to behave?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess my only response would be that, you know, he sees these problems that, you know, like the depiction of women in video games and kind of an obsession with media. And, you know, you could argue that the documentary is sort of trying to expose his own hypocrisy. At the same time, like, I'm maybe willing to forgive him a little bit that nobody is perfect about what they preach. You know, to show him on the phone when he's with his wife, I don't know that it feels to me super revelatory or like that much of a takedown of him, but I do feel like the documentarians maybe gave him just too much space to try and explain what his mission is, when I think some of the more interesting material was truncated. When it's those moments with the family, that's something that we couldn't get from an essay that he's written. Or, you know, a moment like when he's at the convention and one of the other panelists says, "I'm afraid to be in this room right now." I just wonder if there were some of these moments of some real humanity that I think felt very different from him just kind of talking about his values, that to me made for a little bit more of an involving kind of viewing experience than just kind of being talked at by him.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would have enjoyed less of a social commentary focus.
Yeah.
Than we got. But it seems to me that his identity is a social identity, not an individual identity, and that perhaps that is the purpose of the documentary. The fact that when he is being talked at by these people that care about him, that are talking to him about himself, right? His father just watched his speech and said, "I think that you are saying really good things that are important. And here is a note that I have for you. Talk slower so that people have time to digest and hear you."
Yeah.
And he acts like an asshole to his dad.
Yeah.
Or when his wife is trying to talk to him about the logistics of just their relationship, and he's ignoring her and not hearing her and staring at his phone. And you know, I think that is kind of the meat of it, that he wants to be a social creature. But to be a social creature, you have to have individual interactions like you and I are having right now. We're individually talking to each other, and he can't accomplish that goal.
Yeah.
He operates in the social world through this veneer of a screen.
Yeah. Those are definitely the best moments. There's the scene, too, where he's at a hotel room with his brother and sister, which I think is also pretty brief. That might be, maybe there's another scene where we see them, but I think it's the brother who's like, "Yeah, I don't see the value in what he's doing." He's so open and straightforward about it. the sister is similarly sort of an
disillusioned
open book
with him.
Yeah. I think sometimes the best way to understand a person is to listen to the people around them. I think they help to sort of color in what it's like to
actually
be with
have to deal with this person.
Yeah, exactly. What else you got? Blanking for a moment.
I think I covered most of what I think about who is Arthur Chu.
There you go. Don't think this is streaming anywhere, if I remember correctly. Actually, I take that back. I think this is on Prime Video.
Yeah, it might be on Prime. If not, it's rentable.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where I watched this myself. I think this is on Prime Video.
I watched this on the screener. But...
Yeah.
There is one singular shot at the very end that is gorgeous, and it kind of took me off guard because the previous film is very much just like a walk and talk. It's either a sit and interview talk, or it's a walk while he's going around in the world. And then at the end, it might be in China, it could be in America, it's this street with lights, and it's dusk. And it's just a gorgeous shot.
Yeah.
And it totally took me off guard because it's not the prettiest documentary. We're going around in convention centers. We're
pretty bland.
We're in some pretty seedy places, some pretty crowded areas. I mean, it's basically the complete contrast of Arthur Chu's home, which is this very crammed living space that seems to be perpetually messy. And then we're in this beautiful, clean nightscape almost.
Yeah, a very refreshing change of scenery after so much bland, nondescript.
I guess I do have a question. Did you feel relief for the wife when you saw that they were divorced or separated rather now?
Yeah.
I did too.
Yeah, I think she can pursue what she wants to do. She was talking about writing a book, I think.
Writing a book, yeah. And she was still working on her book and is now working, or was when this was released, or finished editing, working part-time at a veterinary hospital.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Good for her.
It sounds like
that sounds condescending. I mean, that's awesome.
It's great that she's pursuing her happiness.
Yes.
Instead of
that is important.
Constantly pushing against someone who's perpetually angry at his own admission. Yeah,
for sure. Maybe talk about her.
Yeah.
Who is Arthur Chu's ex-wife? All right.
That's how you sell books.
Yeah.
On to the next one.
What do we have?
I'm just gonna go climb up on a billboard and sell some pot.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be down at the local precinct in a couple days.
Totally normal, right?
It is in the documentary Billboard Boys, about the 1981-1982 competition of 3 men to stay on a billboard, and whoever is the last man standing gets a home.
That's right, mobile home.
Mobile home, yes.
Yeah.
But a home nevertheless.
That's right. 3 pretty ordinary, everyday kind of guys.
3 guys that drank beer and seemed to chop wood.
Yeah. One guy was entered by his mom. Loved that. I think he was the returning vet.
Yeah.
I adored this doc. I thought it was just so earnest and good-hearted, as were many of the people in it.
It feels like a town of people just talking nice.
Oh, most definitely.
Right? Because you're cutting from talking head to talking head to talking head, and everyone knows what everyone's talking about, and everyone's just a nice person. Like, you never encountered an asshole in the whole doc.
No.
Maybe Dalton, but, like, he's a nice asshole. He's an asshole you can root for.
Yeah. Wait, Dalton, was he the showboating guy?
He was the pot dealer.
Oh, he was the pot dealer. Oh, you thought he was an asshole? I thought he was nice.
No, I think that he's nice, but, you know, in the documentary, we see that he was kind of a competitive asshole.
Oh, gotcha.
You know, not an asshole, but like, he's going to behave like an asshole to win.
Yeah.
like a good winner would do.
A home is on the line.
Exactly. Kind of like Arthur Chu would do in Jeopardy.
Very true. Oh, connections. Yeah. Yeah, I just, I mean, sometimes the content just speaks for itself. I really enjoyed the company of all these people who clearly were so blown away by this having gone on so much longer than they ever thought it would. I just thought so many of these people seemed so humble. And I think the documentary does a pretty good job of not being, sort of tying this in with the economic situation of the time and how this was driven by, just the want for a home when that was so hard to come by.
What was really nice about it is that it was focused on the economics, not the politics. Yeah. Even when they talked about Reagan, they were talking about economics.
Yeah.
They were not talking about the political sphere or any of that. So it was the Rust Belt's dying. Yeah. Bethlehem Steel was our biggest job provider. They went bankrupt at $1.2 billion, I think that it said.
Yeah.
And basically everyone in this part of the world was out of jobs.
Yeah.
And every single one of our Billboard contestants I could see working in a factory of Bethlehem Steel.
Definitely.
So it was heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I think it would be just really easy to slide into that sort of mode into heavy-handed of a fashion, but it never takes the story away from the guys. It always feels like I am still understanding just what this meant to them, how bad they wanted to win, how bad they wanted that house. It never just
how many times they would shit in a bucket to win this thing.
Oh yeah. It very easily, I think, could have become something a little too severe about they were exploited. I think that would take something away from them, and it manages to maintain a very kind of lightheartedness.
Well, they even do talk about being exploited at one point.
Yeah,
but it's great because the filmmakers are shrewd enough to know and get the correct interviews that show that they were not being exploited. They were exploiting the fact that they could exploit the idea of them being exploited.
Yes.
And that's what makes it good.
Yeah, that's
the depth to it.
It's so entertaining when they start trying to turn this around on the radio station.
On the, what's the McMillionaire.
Yeah. They're like, we want 2 homes. We're not going anywhere. We both want a house.
No, that was before the, I think it started happening before he got arrested, right? When they wanted 3 homes.
Yeah.
They would have come down for 3 homes.
Yeah.
And then there was that interview where the guy wanted to give them all homes and just get them down off the billboard. And that's when the Wall Street Journal piece was written.
Yeah.
So she effectively took 3 homes away.
Wow.
What a evil journalist.
She has to live with that. That is painful. Yeah, it is.
It made her career.
It is crazy. Just like we were talking about before recording, how this was as sensational as it was. It feels like kind of a small story somehow. By today's standards, I guess. I don't know. Even as I say that, it doesn't feel quite right.
It's just so small locally. It's these 2 guys, and it's a small period of time in their lives, and that's all this is about.
Yeah.
And there's a 3rd guy, but he's dead now. So we are only getting these interviews from these 2 guys. Yeah. And then I think the dead guy's wife.
Yeah.
So it is just so small and local. And we're talking about dealing pot from a billboard. We're talking about 3 guys living on a billboard. We're talking about shitting in buckets on a billboard. I don't know about you. It never comes up in the documentary. But I was like, what about the muscle atrophy? How are you avoiding muscle atrophy? Because I was watching The Expanse while I was doing all these documentaries, so deeply involved in sci-fi, and muscle atrophy is kind of a major thing that happens in space. So I was like, what's going on here? That was top of my mind.
Jumping jacks?
Jumping jacks, push-ups, squats. You gotta wake up and do that every single day if you're staying in that small of a confined area.
Yeah.
You can't even jump rope.
Yeah, they don't. They have the bare essentials. When they're talking about what they do for fun, one guy's One guy reads like rifle magazines. Like, how many times can you read a rifle magazine for 9 months?
Didn't they say that he was getting a rifle magazine in like a Russian language or something that he couldn't read?
Is that right? Oh, that's even more miserable.
Just so that he could like look at the guns.
Yeah. It snows. It looks like a blizzard hits at one point.
I would have logged out. I'm done.
Like, that's it. I'm done. Not worth it. Take the house.
I'm cold.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's just fun to listen to these people talk about it and clearly see how mind-blowing this was to them. They're like, yeah, like each time they say, I just could not believe it, like it gets me, I believe how sort of momentous this was.
Well, I like if someone told me that there were 3 people that had been on a billboard along I-5 or like Highway 9 or 522 or something.
Yeah.
During the snowpocalypse just now, I would be like, really? That is truly fascinating.
Yeah.
But I would also assume that the guys would be just like that guy who's with his wife during the interviews. When he's asked questions, he just goes,
"Oh, just shrug."
Shrug.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my type of guy.
Yeah. So unassuming, modest.
Yeah.
He was great.
He's like, there's nothing to brag about. I lived in a tent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everyone could see me for like half a year.
He's like, you're acting like this is my proudest achievement.
This is embarrassing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, him and his wife kind of looking at each other like, you want to tell him?
Because I know.
Yeah. It's fun to watch the two guys have their reunion. I didn't, it's kind of fun because we're seeing them talk to each other throughout the doc, and we don't realize that this is actually the first time they've seen each other in
until
many years.
About the end of the doc.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we see they're drinking, I think it was Miller Lights, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
You too.
Yeah.
Enjoy yourselves. You deserved it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of what I look for in a doc, like the story of a really specific event that tells me a little bit about the time, the place, what it was like, for these people to live in that time and place.
It's kind of like a full footnote on a book about history, right?
Yeah.
It's like we just got a full footnote about history in 1982, 1983.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Highly recommended for me. You?
Yeah. I liked it. I don't think I liked it as much as you, but I
Fair
certainly
enough.
think that anyone interested in any sort of history should go spend an hour and 20 minutes with this, like I
Easy
did,
sit.
while I'm working out at the gym, and just appreciate it. I watched it once again on my phone. Digital format, scaled great. The interviews were fantastic on my phone, and I think I finished the last 30 minutes here on my big screen TV. And if anything, it detracted from the quality because it was less confined, less tight. There's something about when you got headphones in and you're plugged in and you're focused that just increases the quality.
Oh, yeah.
So
most definitely.
I think that regardless of what venue you are able to watch this in, you'll enjoy it. And, make time for it in any part of your daily life. You'll know more about reality and more about history.
Just kick back with a Bud Light, you'll feel like one of the gang.
Miller Lite.
You're right. Fair enough. That's Billboard Boys.
On to, quite possibly, the best doc of this episode, if not one of the best docs of 2018.
I could not agree more.
John McEnroe, In the Realm of Perfection.
It'd be easier if people realize that it's me making a statement like, oh, you do your job and I'll do mine, rather than me just complaining for the hell of it.
John McEnroe is not the thing that the documentary is about. John McEnroe is the subject in which the documentary seems to inhabit itself.
Yes.
And that makes for a stunning documentary.
It does. Yeah, it's a weird one to describe because it's kind of like a doc about the making of an instructional video about
And it
tennis.
also feels like a commercial instruction video while also feeling like an avant-garde Jean-Luc Godard
art
house documentary film Agnes Varda.
Oh yeah,
David Lynch somehow. Like it's just it's everything. When we go to that stick figure animation,
oh yeah,
it's like what the fuck is even happening right now?
Yes, it is a nice onion of a doc. You can kind of peel back the layers and talk about each one. You can talk about this doc. You can talk about the doc that's being made within this doc, the instructional video part. Yeah, I thought it was fascinating. It was not at all what I was expecting. I thought this was just a John McEnroe doc, an artful one, but just a John McEnroe doc. It is not that.
When it started, did you think that you were watching the wrong thing?
Oh, I thought it was a very real possibility.
I did as well. I was like, I'm going to give it more time, but I think this is probably not the correct thing loaded.
I thought it was either wrong or it was just going to suck because it looked like, I don't know, just old instructional tennis footage. And I was like,
and it had nothing to do with John McEnroe, so it was like...
Something's off.
Ooh, this is going to be rough.
Yeah.
And then it translated itself into the highest form of art.
Most definitely. I was quite riveted by it. And feel it was kind of revelatory. I mean, I think this is as much to me about just the cinematic form as it is about tennis or John McEnroe. The way it's kind of showing how just through new angles and new unconventional shot compositions, content that's super familiar to us, like a tennis match, can appear totally new. And that's what a great filmmaker does, is they look at new ways to tell a story that we've probably heard some variation of before.
What did you think about it when they said that they were shooting at 120 frames per second on 16 millimeter?
Oh, I don't think I even remember that.
Yeah.
Look, it's a good looking doc.
It looks really good. I mean, I've seen 3 shorts from the 1890s that are slow motion shorts.
Oh, yeah.
But they are essentially photographs that are stitched together and then flipped during projection.
Yeah.
That are consequently shown as slow motion docs. I think that from a technical standpoint, this is the earliest footage I've ever seen digitally projected and edited in a way where you could say the film has now become a slow motion film.
Yeah, that's interesting. It looks great. It's the best looking tennis match you'll ever see.
Yeah, but I mean, like, just to think about, like, okay, so the first time that we were capturing slow motion images that could be adapted for film, even if it is a documentary film, or a tennis documentary in the 1980s. Right?
Yeah.
We're talking 16, 15 years before The Matrix goes into production and releases.
Yeah, I love the connection or the through line it kind of draws between, you know, where the French Open is played and the photography experiments from, you know, like the late 19th century, where I don't remember the name of the photographers who were, you know, doing, you know, objects in motion kind of studies and that kind of thing. Just this great little connection between.
Well, I think it's the
spaces.
You're talking about the 1800s.
Yeah, like 1890s. Yeah.
So it's the Edison Company, the Lumiere brothers, and then what's his name, Jean Millier.
I don't think it was one of those 3 big names who were doing these particular studies, because I thought these guys were looking at like things that weren't visible to the eye. The photos were of like radio waves and that kind of thing.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And you're talking early 1900s, late 1800s?
Yeah, I think you said it was 1890s.
Okay.
Yeah. French for sure. I don't remember the guy's name. But
yeah, the first thing I think about is Jean Millier or the Lumiere brothers.
Yeah, it was it looked to me like more of a scientific experiment than like the, you know, horse kind of, well, I guess even the horse kind of thing that the
I mean, have you seen the horse in motion or the javelin in motion or the athlete in motion? You know, those are very simplistic works that are still transitory and give us more in cinema.
Yeah, definitely. You know, the guy clearly knows his cinema history.
He does.
Yeah. but it's never overly academic. Like, I think this is
but it's just the right amount of academia.
Yeah,
it feels like a good Cinephiliacs episode.
Yeah, most definitely.
It, like, you're like, okay, I'm learning some stuff about film history, some stuff about tennis history, but I'm also spending time in, like, the realm of perfection.
Yeah. I kept kind of, like, interpreting or just reading it in different ways. Like, okay, like, in one sense, I can kind of think about McEnroe as an artist in pursuit of perfection. I can also kind of think about not the documentary of John McEnroe, but the documentary filmmaker who made this instructional video, almost kind of like as a film critic in a way, like the way a film critic can kind of find a new angle to look at a particular text and reveal something new about it. He's saying, like, let's abandon these old ways of making an instructional video and shoot a live match in a new way. And
this is the documentary where he begins to talk about how film criticism means the creation of time, correct?
Well, I think that is like what one of the film critics who we learn about discusses
within this documentary,
right?
Is
But I don't think the critic who talked about that was the one who was actually making this instructional video.
Agreed, but I think that the guy who's making this video, who's making the film, rather, is using that tool.
Gotcha.
To embody what he's doing with the documentary.
Ah, got it. Yeah, I could see that.
There's, I don't remember who said this, but there's a UFC trainer, or an MMA trainer, rather, who said that there's 4 different types of fighter: the artist, the athlete, the competitor, and then there's another one. And when I watch John McEnroe, I feel like if that's true of fighting, that's true of tennis maybe, and that he's an artist, and that a lot of the people we're seeing footage of seem to be athletes, but what he's doing feels like art. And that might just be how well it's captured, the way that it's captured, but it feels like you're watching an artist more than you're watching an athlete perform.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. You were more drawn to McEnroe as an artist. I kept thinking about, like, the maker of this.
No, I was thinking about both.
Video.
But I mean, when you're watching McEnroe, and you're not, or when you're watching this documentary, and you're not zooming over to see what the next resolution focus recommendation is.
Yeah.
From the guy who's shooting across the way from you, you're watching McEnroe, and half the time you're thinking about, like, what a stunning shot this is and what they're doing with the slow motion editing, especially when they're rewinding it and replaying it. But the other half for me is like, this dude is performing like a monster.
Yeah.
Like that serve over and over and over and over again, and that introduction of him serving, where it's not him doing the same serve over and over, it's the style of his serve in multiple occasions being super cut together.
Yeah.
That looks like art to me. That's like watching a great calligraphist.
Yeah. Despite, all of these sort of, cinematic essay writing that they're kind of doing, they never just let you forget about the fact that this guy was just remarkable. Like, it is still a doc about McEnroe because that's what this footage reminds us of.
He is the subject of the footage being depicted.
Yeah.
He is the subject of perfection.
Yeah, I mean, I would still say if you're interested in John McEnroe, I would still tell you to watch the documentary, just because there's a lot going on. I don't think it ever drifts it can't drift far away from it. I think there's it's just denser than I thought it would be. And just great to look at. The score, or not really the score, but the music was often just spot on.
Sublimely edited.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Even though it's an hour and a half, did you feel exhausted, like, halfway through?
It does feel long, because it does, in a way, it feels like you're seeing the same kind of footage over and over.
Does it feel long, or does it feel dense?
Both. I mean, it did feel long to me. Not in a bad way, but...
I mean, I guess maybe density is the same thing as feeling long, but I was just like, this is just too much. My mind needs a break. Like, I had to take a little bit of a break. I watched it earlier today, and I just took like a 15-minute break. I just had to go do something else to let myself process all the stuff that I was just taking in.
Yeah, it's a sign of a great doc, and there's just lots to chew on, and it's all very entertaining at the same time.
I am an enormous fan, and I'm pretty sure this did not get nominated for an Oscar, which makes me very, very skeptical.
Yeah, let's just go there. So nominations-wise, not that the Oscars are everything, but...
they're basically nothing.
Let's just do it. We got RBG, of Fathers and Sons.
RBG made it?
Yeah.
Over Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Yeah. I still haven't seen RBG, so I cannot comment. Cannot fairly comment.
For Best Documentary, we have Free Solo, Hale County, This Morning, This Evening, RBG, Minding the Gap, and Of Fathers and Sons.
There we go. Are there any you would personally swap out?
Absolutely. John McEnroe for RBG. Won't You Be My Neighbor for RBG. Basically anything for RBG, because it's not a very good documentary. It is not. It does not have a multi-pronged stance. It is all about venerating someone who, you know, she's going through medical difficulties right now, so we all like hope she's doing all right, and you know, she's kind of becoming a, you know, a modern day saint.
Yeah, which she's definitely transcending her.
I don't value those documentaries. I value more documentaries that are scrutable, where you're showing me the bad policies, the bad votes that she did, which she did have, which she did support really poor policies and bad ideas at certain points in her career. And I think that she's on the record of a few votes that she would take back and change. And the fact that documentary never does any of that, and it's just basically proselytizing democratic values based on CNN's agenda. I think it's a very poor documentary in comparison to other more artistic, broad pieces such as McEnroe, or even the more narrow-focused, really positive Won't You Be My Neighbor.
Yeah.
I think it's a good documentary, but it's in that 3 realm instead of that 3.5, 4. Like, it's not that otherworldly thing. The footage we get is good, but it's not focused enough to be respectable.
Yeah. What's your guess? What will win?
That Gap is going to be minded.
I think it's his to lose.
His to lose.
That's my guess, and I feel pretty good about that.
And with that, Bing Liu will become the next Jordan Peele.
Ooh.
So it is said. So
Bold
it is
words.
written.
I like it.
Go Bing go.
Go Bing go. It's a good spot to end it on.
I think so.
Rooting for Bing.
Rooting for Bing. Go Bing. Go.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.
You're the best and we love you!
Doc Talk Part 2. That's a wrap, folks.